This episode of All About Mythos originally aired on KWDC Delta College Radio and has been edited for YouTube. All research was done by Nico. Any potential misinformation is unintentional and caused by human error in the research process. Thank you for listening. My name is Nico, and joining me in the studio today we have Dani, Romo, and Trena Dinwiddie. Our show topic today is Irish mythology and the Fae, so sit back and enjoy our show. Hello to all listeners, welcome to All About Mythos, the radio show about mythology from all around the world. Today we'll be delving into Irish mythology and discussing the Tuatha Dé Danann and the Fae folk. Alright, so what do you guys know about Celtic or Irish mythology?
Zero. I know the Irish were hated by the British throughout history. And I'm pretty sure that, if there's any Irish mythology, that the British absolutely dunked on it.
Yeah, pretty much. I know that Lord of the Rings was heavily inspired by Celtic mythology. Do any of us know Lord of the Rings?
Never in my life, no.
Trena, do you?
I know, the second movie when the trees are fighting and there's a flood, and yeah, that's all I know.
We were forced to read the first chapter in, the 5th grade, but...
I'm pretty sure that was the 7th grade, and we had to read the whole book.
Okay, well, I didn't read it,
yeah.
So...
We had to read the entire book, too, and it was so boring, at least to me, because the descriptions are so long of everything.
Yes.
You could skip over, 5 pages, and they'll still be talking about the same thing. Alright, so I know you guys are interested in the Fae, but first we're going to start talking about basic information and their gods and stuff. So Celtic mythology is basically an umbrella term for 3 different branches, which are Irish, Welsh, and Gaulish mythology. And there are a lot of different similarities between each other, and Irish mythology is considered a branch of Celtic. Irish mythology was told orally, like a lot of other mythologies were, and they were first recorded in the 11th century by Christian monks. And Irish mythology is actually the most well-preserved, so that's the one we're going to be talking about.
Really?
Alright, so their mythology is split into 4 different cycles. They're the mythological cycle, which is the stories and poems about the Tuatha Dé Danann. There's the Ulster cycle, which is heroic tales from the ancient kingdom of Ulaid. There's Fianna tales, which are about the mythical hero Finn and the Fianna warriors. And then there's the King's cycle, which is historical tales about the kings of Ireland. They kind of intersect with each other a whole lot, but we're going to be focusing mainly on the mythological cycle, because that's mythology and magic. So the Tuatha Dé Danann are the gods of Irish mythology, and I say gods in quotes. We're going to get into that. So they live in this place called Tir na nUg, which is a Celtic otherworld, meaning land of the young, and it's basically an earthly paradise that can only be reached through magic and magic portals. And they're said to be the 5th race of beings to invade Ireland. So they lived in Ireland before the Celtic people arrived.
Wait a minute. What do you mean?
Invade?
What do you mean 5th race?
So in Celtic mythology, they believe that there were a bunch of different groups of people that lived in Ireland before them. So before the Tuatha Dé Danann came, there was the Firbolg, which were said to come from Greece. And I think one source said that the Tuatha Dé Danann came from Spain. So a whole bunch of people just came and settled in Ireland, and then another group would come and they would fight, and then they would claim Ireland as their own. The Tuatha Dé Danann was said to have come to Ireland in a mist or a dark cloud, and they drove out the Firbolg. And all of that is said to happen between 1897 and 1700 BCE, which puts them about 1,000 years after the pyramids of Giza were built.
Wow.
So it's pretty old. And then after the Tuatha Dé Danann came the warrior tribe of Milesians, which were the Gallic-speaking Celts. So they arrived to Ireland after them and drove the Tuatha Dé Danann underground. And some sources say that the Tuatha Dé Danann, after they were pulled or forced underground, they ended up using their magic to become the Sidhe, which are the first Fae folk. So the Tuatha Dé Danann are basically the Fae.
That is so cute. That is adorable. But here's my question. So, you have all this mythology, right? But when you say fae, you know, do people, wait.
Yes.
So, is there a difference between mythology and religion?
They intersect a whole lot. Like, I know that in Greek mythology, like, there's a pretty distinct difference from mythology and religion, because most Hellenists follow, like, the practices of ancient cults that were in Greece, but mythology is, like, the stories that they told in, like, plays and stuff.
So, like, would the Irish worship the fae?
Most of Irish mythology is basically just either appeasing them or keeping them away or, like, not getting on their bad side, pretty much.
So they don't worship them, but they, like, coexist in mythology.
Yeah, they coexist a lot.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah. So that brings up the question of, are the Tuatha Dé Danann considered gods, or are they just a powerful race of human-like beings? And that's, like, a big topic of debate with Irish mythology.
Because, see, you have... Wait. Because on one hand, you have mythology that's, you know, really rich in detail, but on the other hand, you have people who want to practice Christianity and Catholicism living in Europe. So it would be really hard to balance the two if you have these really powerful beings, but then you also have, on the other hand, God. And so, you know, I can understand why there's such a wide debate.
Yeah. So, the debate around it comes from just a whole bunch of different things. So some sources call the Tuatha Dé Danann fallen angels that were banished from heaven for being too intelligent, and also not allowed in hell because they were, like, not evil enough. So, that's probably, like, the Christian influences.
That reminds me of this one quote. Stop. Okay, you might have to cut this out, but from Hamilton, where he says, "Pray that hell or heaven lets me in."
I can leave that in.
All right, we're leaving that in.
I just think it's funny that they were banished from heaven for being too intelligent.
Yeah, like, where you gonna go then? You're just on Earth?
It really shows how religion really just, like, or it's catered to less educated people because they don't question it.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, but it's like, I'm not sure if it was, some sources said that it was too intelligent, but also a lot of sources on the Tuatha Dé Danann and fair folk and stuff say that they don't exist at the same sort of sense of morality as humans do. Like, their definitions of good and evil are very different from humans.
Yeah, that makes sense. And also, what the Fae remind me of, you know, don't quote me on this, but it really reminds me of those movies where the earth is hollow, and so, like, all...
Godzilla!
Yes! And so you have all these monsters and, like, supernatural beings living inside the earth where they have their own society. Yeah.
Yeah, that's
Did they have, like, their own world, or would they traverse the earth?
It's said to be, like, Tirnanug and then the fairy world are said to be of Earth, or like underground, but it's also said to be, like, a different realm.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Yeah, because a lot of these stories about, like, a hollow Earth, like, you think about, you know... Stop, but I was going to say How to Train Your Dragon, but you think about How to Train Your Dragon, and it's a whole other world, and they have their own set of rules, and the way things work, like, it's an entirely different atmosphere.
Yeah, I can see that. So some sources also change their arrival to Ireland from a cloud of mist into an arrival on boats, and then after they arrived at Ireland, they burned their boats, which created that black mist, or black clouds. So that makes them sound a lot less magical and a lot more human-like. And then they were also just generally depicted in a much more human way than a lot of other mythologies depict their gods. So, like, in a lot of interpretations, the most magical parts of them are really just their magic weapons or their treasures and stuff.
That's really interesting, because I think we brought this up another earlier episode, but Didn't we say that some of mythology could be attributed to the fact that people didn't have glasses back then? So like people are looking at, regular people and they don't have glasses on, and you know how sometimes someone will take something out and they mistake it for something else? What if that happened with the Irish and they were just like, oh my god, the Fae, they're real, and it's some guy like pushing his boat into the water.
It also applies to like the thing we talked about earlier of like explaining the stuff that we couldn't explain with science with magic.
Yeah. But it helps explain why the Fae are so human-like in Irish mythology. Not that it explains it entirely, but I'm sure, at least there's one guy out there who said, I saw a Fae, and he just needed an oculist.
Yeah. So with the Tuatha Dé Danann, of course, there's no historical or archaeological evidence to support that they existed, like with a lot of other like mythological events and stuff. But it's likely that they were inspired by pre-Celtic cultures like the Bell Beaker culture that lived at 2800 BCE in like the Celtic region. And then in older texts, Tuatha Dé Danann wasn't actually their original name. Their original name was Tuatha Dé, which meant people of the gods. So the Christian monks that were recording all this also typically referred to them as god kindreds, god folk, or god men, but they never referred to them as just gods. And one possible reason for that is that they just didn't want to refer to them as gods because they were promoting monotheism in Christianity.
Yeah.
And they also called the Israelites in their texts as Tuatha Dé to refer to them as people of God. The reason that they're called Tuatha Dé Danann is it was likely to differentiate them from the Israelites, so that's one reason. And then they also were named after the goddess Danu, because Tuatha Dé Danann means people of Danu. But the thing about that is that Danu doesn't actually exist in a lot of the ancient texts.
Really?
Yeah.
Did they have a thing against women, or...?
What I found when researching Irish gods is that there's actually a lot of, like, powerful women in it, so that's cool.
See, this is what I always think about. All of these myths from other countries and areas of the world, like native peoples will always have their strong women and their third gender, but then you have all the Europeans with their monotheism, and it just interests me so much that monotheism is what ended up standing out. I mean, if you're being held at sword point to believe in one god, it makes sense. But for women to be considered powerful back in the day, and for us to go backwards, like, how did that happen?
Yeah. But with Danu, it's likely that it was another version of saying Anu or Anna, because she's the mother of gods. But at the same time, Anu/Anna isn't talked about a whole lot in the texts, like she's not very important. One theory that I came across was that the word Dan in ancient texts means artistic skill, so it's possible that Danann was derived from that, because the Tuatha Dé Danann are known as very good craftsmen and artisans and musicians, and like swordsmiths and stuff. And then this doesn't really help us because none of us know Lord of the Rings, but the Tuatha Dé Danann was the main inspiration for elves for J.R.R. Tolkien. I had to pause to remember his name.
Yeah, I have nothing to say on that, but that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
So Tolkien, was he Irish?
I'm not sure if he was. All I know is that he was heavily inspired by Celtic mythology. I don't know anything about him, if I'm going to be honest.
Yeah, I mean...
Alright, so now we're going to get into the She or the Fair Folk. And the term She is like the proper term for them, but it's not typically used in fear of catching their attention or disrespecting them. So instead, honorifics like the Fair Folk, People of the Hills, or Gentry, or other stuff like that are used. And I might be completely wrong about this, because while researching, I ended up getting completely confused, because this is the first episode where I went into mythology just completely blind. But from my understanding, Tir na nOg is kind of like the land of the fair folk, and people from Tir na nOg were known for luring humans in, and usually it was women luring in human men to make them their husbands. And then another word for them might be Ansel Ale, which was a fairy realm. There might just be a whole other world with just a whole bunch of different realms in there. So that's my interpretation of it.
The Fae multiverse.
The Fae multiverse.
So when you say the fair folk, you mean the Fae?
Yeah. That's like, I'm sure they can also be called Fae, but like fair folk is like, I don't know, it just sounds cooler.
Yeah, it does. It's interesting that they use honorifics.
Yeah.
Like, I would think that they just have titles. Because a lot of other mythology, they just have titles for all these powerful people. You don't say, what's an honorific? Father Zeus, I don't know.
Well...
That's not an honorific.
Greek mythology used epithets, which are kind of like honorifics. Or like, epithets were where they would pray to a specific part of the god. So that was a whole way that they worshipped.
A specific part of the god? You're talking like worshipping his hand? His calf?
Like, Zeus is the god of the sky and also justice.
Oh.
So you would pray to justice.
Okay.
Pray to his hand.
Sorry, guys.
Pray to his hand of justice.
His left hand, because he's a righty.
Yeah, but it's kind of like, it reminds me of stuff from other religions of like, in Native American culture, you're typically not supposed to say Wendigo for like the same reasons as you wouldn't say she. And then there's also Apophis in Egyptian mythology, where you're not supposed to say their name.
He who shall not be named.
Pretty much.
Sorry.
That's they who shall not be named. That's probably, honestly, that's probably where J.K. Rowling got inspiration from, maybe. Who knows?
Who knows?
Who knows with J.K. Rowling?
When did we start talking about Potter?
I have no idea.
Yeah. We started with a who shall not be named. Sorry.
Potter.
Potter.
Sorry.
A water bottle.
I've never read any of the books.
Bottle of water. Interesting.
Interesting. Alright, so there were a bunch of entrances to the Fairfolk Otherworld, like, all over the place. And that's where, like, fairy circles and mushroom circles come from. There were also just stone circles all over. And then there were also islands that you would only be able to see every once in a while. Like, there's the Wraithlin Island off of Causeway Coast. That's called the Green Isle, and it's basically a fairy island that's only visible once every 7 years. And I think that's basically just, like, a lake rising and lowering throughout the years. I don't know how lakes work.
So the fairies of mythology, did they develop into the fairies that we know today? I'm talking Tinkerbell. I'm talking, I don't know if you guys ever seen the movie, but The Great Fairy Rescue.
I have a question. Why are they called fairies, but they live in Pixie Hollow?
Exactly.
There are no pixies in Pixie Hollow.
Wait,
Is there a
yeah.
difference between pixies and fairies?
Well, in Irish mythology, I'm pretty sure pixies are a type of fae.
Isn't like the difference? Well, I don't know if it's like actual, but I'm pretty sure in like Tinkerbell, pixies don't have wings or something.
I need to catch up on my Tinkerbell lore.
If we're talking about the Tinkerbell verse, I think that for what it is, it's more.
Sorry, I was thinking about the pixies from Winx Club, not Tinkerbell.
Winx. Is there Winx in Irish mythology?
Like Winx Club?
No,
the
Wings.
movie?
Wings.
Oh, Wings.
Yes. Do the fairy have
probably.
wings?
Like, they're basically just known as shapeshifters, so they could just do whatever they want.
Really? So, because if we're talking like modern day fairies, so the fae were just these humanoid monsters, essentially.
Yeah, well, they could be humanoid, or I know that this one Irish pagan that I used to follow, he said that they often, like, show up as animals. So, like, he made this joke about, like, people wanting to be in relationships with fae, and he was just like, that's a pig.
No.
That is a pig you want to marry.
There are so many adult romance books on fae. It's insane. I don't know if you guys know the series A Court of Thorns and Roses.
I've heard of it.
I've heard of it.
I think it's the most watched book hashtag on TikTok. It has billions and billions of views, and people love it all the time. People make like cloth-bound classics of it. And that's it. That's it.
What else? So when Christianity eventually came to Ireland, the entrances to the other world or to the fairy world were changed to entrances to hell. Which,
No.
Of course. Leave it to Christianity.
Leave it to the Europeans and the Brits to come over and bring the concept of hell.
To be fair, this one feels kind of justified, because, like, the stories of people going into, like, Tir na Nog or the fairy world, there's this one story of this child of Finn that he, like, went into the fairy world after falling in love with this one Tuatha Dé Danann, and he stayed there for, like, what felt like 3 years, and then he eventually got homesick and was like, okay, I want to go home to Earth now. And his Tuatha Dé Danann wife was basically like, okay, you can go, but you need to stay on my horse for the entire time that you're there.
Wait, what do you mean the horse? Like, he's going up? Like, he's traversing the skies on a horse?
He had to, like, ride in on her horse, so, like,
okay.
just through a portal. But, like, he came back through the portal to Earth and found out that 300 years had gone by instead of 3.
No! No!
Yeah, and then he came across these guys that were trying to move a rock or a boulder or something, and he was like, oh, the children of Fianna can do that because we're so strong. So he tried to pick up the rock and then he fell off the horse and died.
Stop! What is this story? Why are they moving a boulder?
I don't know.
Why is he so bad at math? 3 years instead of 300. Honestly, me too. Wait, what do you mean he fell? Like he fell and hit his head, or what?
No, it's because of the time difference.
Oh.
Because basically, if he stayed on the horse, he'd stay in the Fae time. But since he left the horse, he went back to human time. So 300 years went by like that for him.
That's so goofy. That's so goofy.
Yeah. So another change that the Christians did, where they changed the Tuatha Dé Danann Brigid into Saint Brigid, or Saint Brigid of Kildare, which is the patroness saint of Ireland. And then even with Christian or Catholic influences, the fair folk are still commonly believed in Ireland and other Celtic countries. And an example of this are in 1999, a motorway was actually rerouted to save a fairy tree because they were afraid of fairy retribution. And
Sorry,
then
every time you say fairy, I think of little tiny fairies, but then I remember you talking about like these giant monster folk.
they're at least human size.
At least human size that people live in fear of.
Yeah, and then a lot of farmers and landowners also plow or mow around fairy forts and stone circles.
Oh,
So it's a really influential part of their culture.
that's really wholesome.
I have a question because I learned about this in my bio class, but you know, like when mushrooms are the reproductive parts of fungi. So whenever mushrooms sprout out, that's what's going on. Anyway, mushrooms, when they sprout out, they form a circle, and they're called, I forgot if they're called magic rings or fairy rings, but what's the tie between mushrooms and the fae?
I wasn't able to find anything immediate in my research, but I'm pretty sure, like, mushroom circles are, like, a very common thing in fae stuff. And whether that's, like, from the reason that the fairies are now seen as how they are is because there was, like, an Irish, what's it called? Irish resurrection? What's the word?
Renaissance?
Renaissance.
Renaissance.
There was an Irish Renaissance, and then people started, like, reinterpreting the stories and stuff. So I'm not sure if mushroom circles are from original Irish mythology or from that reinterpretation, but...
Because I read somewhere that if you stand into one of the magic circles, it was either like the fae will steal your soul or they'll like try to help you find your love in exchange for your soul.
Yeah, pretty
In
much.
exchange for your soul. Give me your blood!
Yeah, the thing that I heard about mushroom circles is that, like, it's something with decomposition of, like, when something dies, then, you know, the ground becomes really filled with minerals and stuff and becomes very good for stuff to grow. So, like, that's where mushroom circles come from. So, yeah. What else? we're not going to be able to get to my last section about the changelings.
Can we do it next time?
All
Because
right.
we're out of time.
Yeah,
That's
we're
why.
out of
Are
time,
they
but
really gonna kick us out?
we can do like a really quick section,
Yeah.
like next episode. All right, well, that's pretty much it. Any final thoughts?
Final thoughts?
Love the Fae.
Yes, I do.
The Fae are really cool, honestly.
And I honestly think that it's
Love the Fae.
love the Fae.
Love the Fae.
And I think it's really interesting that the British were. Sorry, I bring up the British all the time. Sorry,
That's
guys.
all okay.
I just hate the British.
You're in a British literature class
I
right
am.
now.
I'm thinking about the British so much. You know, this makes me wonder if we ever have an episode where we're really desperate for some mythology. Did the British have
Just
mythology?
desperate.
Like we need that mythology. Did the British believe in anything, or is there a mythology just?
Honestly, I don't have any ideas for the next episode, so I might do that.
British mythology. I just
to
want to
see
know
what they have.
Just the quote, did the British believe in anything?
Because think about it. Honestly, Christianity and their religion is mainly just fear mongering.
It really
And so
is.
it's not really belief as much as it is the fear that you're going to sin and go to hell.
Yeah, I mean, that was mostly just produced by the church, like,
Yeah.
later on.
Well, true.
We could do a Christian episode. That would be interesting.
That would be interesting.
Look at Europe pre-Christ.
Can we pull up a picture of canon Jesus?
Canon Jesus?
Yes.
I don't think anyone agrees about a canon Jesus.
Okay, I'm talking about a Middle Eastern Jesus. You haven't seen the AI generated canon Jesus? And when I say canon, I mean like the accurate one, because Jesus was, born. He wasn't white.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If he was born in the Middle East.
He was born in the Middle
white.
East. That's what I'm saying. When I say canon, I mean like the Middle Eastern Jesus, because that's like accurate to life.
Have you seen that
Not
one?
a literal canon.
Have you
with
seen that
Jesus.
one comedian?
Of course I know what canon Jesus
Well,
meant.
for the listeners.
Have you seen that one comedian that was like, if Jesus had been born white in the middle of the Middle East, that would have been the miracle?
Stop.
Sorry. So I guess we're doing a Christian episode next week.
Let's go. Christianity?
But yeah, my thought on Irish mythology is that it feels, out of the mythologies I know, it feels like the most realistic, kind of.
Yeah.
Like, it makes the most sense to me of, like, the gods are kind of just vibing on their own.
Yeah. It honestly does. And I think a part of that has to do with how much detail there is and how well recorded it is.
Yeah.
Because just the way the story pieces together makes a lot of sense. And that if the story had been lost to time, then the Fae would be we wouldn't know anything about them.
Yeah. And I find it interesting that, like, the Tuatha Dé Danann are, like, just a race of people that
Yeah.
came to Ireland. Like, even if it's not historically accurate, like, that's basically what happens,
Yeah.
like, in the real world.
And I find it interesting how they didn't worship the Fae.
Yeah.
How religion and mythology, in their case, was separate.
Yeah. Like, they kind of just appease them. Like, sometimes they would make offerings to them, I think, but it was to, like, get basic stuff, I think.
They're honestly real for that. If I was Irish in 400 BC, I wouldn't pray to anybody. I'd be like, I need to get this wheat. Like, I'm dying. I need to get this fish.
I need to
like-
get this wheat and no one can bother me.
That's the one thing on my mind.
Give some offerings to the Fae to leave me alone.
That hustle culture, I gotta get my wheat.
That feels like such an Irish thing. I don't know why.
Honestly. But yeah, good for the Irish, but also sad for them because of how other Europeans would discriminate against them.
Yeah.
And how they would... It's not that the mythology was let go, but that they adopted other forms of religion.
Yeah. And, like, current Fae, like, beliefs in fairy circles and stuff, it's, like, fading now, but, like, it's still a very strong superstition. So, yeah, it's very interesting. But we're gonna wrap up now. that's the episode. Next week, we're apparently doing Christian mythology.
Let's go.
Christian mythology sounds cursed. Those
It
two
does.
words
Is
don't
it wrong,
really.
though?
It's like.
You know, honestly, for next session's gonna be a trauma dump.
It really is,
Everything the church has done. Everything the church has done. Yeah.
If I don't find anything on British mythology specifically, then it's gonna be Christian.
Let's go.
Oh, I just remembered I need to cite my sources.
Ouch.
So my sources are, I pulled from a whole bunch of different places. So there's Irish Myths, the YouTube channel, there's Celtic Titles, Wilderness Island, Irish Pagan School, and then these two articles were for the Changeling stuff, so I'm not going to say those.
Irish pagan school?
Yeah.
Is that a school in Ireland?
It's just a website.
Oh.
irishpagan.school.
Oh, okay.
I don't think it's .edu.
I was about to say.
All right. Well, thank you for listening, and we'll see you next week.
Bye.